Morning guys, I hope you're doing well. It's Sam from Gemini, and today we're going to be talking about martial arts which should become extinct. Booyah! Okay, as always, let's start on a nice positive. Hope you're doing well, and hope you're doing dandy and getting ready once again for Halloween and beyond. So in this video, we're going to be talking about martial arts which should become extinct. Now, this is part 2 of a very mini series which I'm doing. The first part I did was about dating and martial arts, based on a poll which I did in my community tab. This video about martial arts which should become extinct got an equal number of votes as the other video, so I thought it's only fair that I do a video about martial arts which should become extinct, in my opinion anyway. So in this video we're going to talk about martial arts which currently exist today. We're not talking about martial arts which already are extinct, because guess what? They are extinct. We don't need to talk about them. It's with martial arts for here and the now that we're going to talk about. So let's get started. Martial art number 1 which needs to be extinct is
ninjutsu.
Ninjutsu. So why should ninjutsu be extinct? Well, for a start, it is outdated. And I believe that is actually the prime reason why it should be extinct. Ninjutsu was born on the battlefield. Ninjutsu was born to assassinate and to kill. And it served its purpose. At the time it came around, it was like feudal Japan. It was designed for assassination. We're not living in those times anymore. People don't go around and assassinate people, or you shouldn't do. You shouldn't do it anyway. You know, if there's any police watching this, I'm not trying to condone people going out to assassinate people. Unless you're involved in armed forces or profession of that ilk, normal people are not going to be going around looking for rival factions, rival heads of football groups, rival sports clubs, rival supermarket CEOs, and then dressing up like a ninja to then throw throwing stars at them or similar, or disappearing in the night and stuff like this. Yeah, it may have served its purpose for when it was around. I'm not necessarily doubting it. Ninjutsu could be a very, very lethal martial art in the right hands. That's not what we're debating here, but we're just saying that it doesn't need to be around anymore. Because if you're now learning ninjutsu, you're learning all those skills of how to kill someone. And then a ninjutsu sensei could say, you know, I'm teaching ninjutsu, but I'm taking away all that dangerous stuff. But then you ask yourself, well, am I actually learning ninjutsu? And then sensei could say, actually, no, you're not. In which case, then what are you learning? And why are you advertising as learning ninjutsu if you're not learning ninjutsu? What's the point of going along and saying you want to learn ninjutsu if you're not going to learn ninjutsu? So ninjutsu, sorry, you should be extinct. Next martial art.
Tang-soo-do.
Tang-soo-do. I was thinking about this one, and I was thinking, what kind of purpose does Tang-soo-do serve? Now, let's break down the name to begin with. Tang-soo-do. It literally translates as the way of the Chinese hand. Tang was a dynasty in China, yet Tang-soo-do claims to be based on Japanese karate, and yet at the same time it claims to be a Korean martial art. So you get a Korean martial art which is using Japanese techniques with a Chinese name. I'll give it credit for being multicultural, but that, I feel, is where the problem lies. Like, why do you need to do this? If you want to learn a Chinese martial art, you'd go off and learn Wing Chun. You learn various forms of Kung Fu. If you want to learn a Korean martial art, go off and learn Hapkido or Taekwondo or something of that ilk. Taekwondo, maybe. If you want to learn a Japanese martial art, go and do Judo, go do Karate, go do Kendo or something like that. It just seems to be like Tang-soo-do wants to have feet in all different camps, or 3 feet in 3 different camps, and humans don't have 3 feet. So one foot's in Japan, the other foot's in China, and that thing between your 2 legs, filthy mind, is dangling in Korea. It seems to be as though it's almost kind of, to me anyway, it comes across as a bit of a sales ploy. Now, I know there is some history behind Tang Sudo of people claim, okay, American GIs serving in the Far East in World War II and the Korean War, they brought back Tang Sudo and they called it like Korean karate, and it was the first proper karate which was brought over to America from Korea, and all this kind of stuff. There could be some validity to that. I'm not doubting there's some genuine evidence and sources which could be brought up to substantiate those claims. However, to me, you would have thought it would have evolved into something else, much like what happened to Taekwondo when the Kwons got together to make Taekwondo. Tang Soo Do hasn't seemed to have really kind of gone down that line of thinking. It seems to be very much a case of, like I said, almost like a market kind of gimmick. But if we advertise ourselves as a Korean martial art, then we've got a base camp in Korea. But if we then claim that it's actually based on Japanese stuff, we've got a base camp in Japan. But then we give it a Chinese name, we've got a base camp in China. It seems to be a martial art which has an identity crisis. And I suppose the older anyone gets, they should become a bit more self-assured in their identity and who and what they are. And I believe it's maybe time for Tang Soo Do to do that as well.
Hankido.
Hankido. So staying in Korea, there's a little known martial art called Hankido. And when I did Taekwondo, I had an instructor who, whenever he taught self-defense, he mostly taught Aikido, Jiu-Jitsu, Hapkido, and something called Hankido. And at the time, I was like a teenager, and I had no idea what Hankido was. And I remember thinking to myself, what on earth's all this stuff? And I'd say to my instructor once, can you show us an Aikido technique? Which he did. Can you please show us a Jiu-Jitsu technique? Which he did. Show us a Hapkido technique. Same again. Can you show us a Hankido technique? And it'll either be no, or he'd show something which is exactly the same as the other three. And that led me to think, does Hankido even exist? And it was only many years later on, I went onto YouTube and typed in Hankido, and it came up with videos of pretty much Hapkido. And it wasn't just one or two videos I watched. This was quite a longitudinal study, and I was trying to find something uniquely Hankido. And again, if you want to break down the name Hankido, Han is used to describe people from Korea. Ki is used as energy, and it's used in other martial arts like Aikido and Hapkido. Do means the way of. So it's the way of it's the way of Korean harmony, essentially is what the name is. But it is literally, from what I can tell, just Hapkido. Or maybe like a slightly modified version of Hapkido, but the modification comes from pretty much the personal influence of the instructor. It's not a systematic influence. It's not something like Hankido has to ascribe to these dogmas and paradigms. That's what makes up the martial art. It just seems to be the instructor's like, oh, I'll teach you Hapkido, but instead of focusing maybe on too many wrist locks, we'll focus a bit more on collar grabs for a change, or I'll maybe do a few more kicks than the other instructor. And Hankido just seems to be almost a bit like a marketing ploy, a bit of a rip-off of Hapkido. Personally, I don't see much reason for Hankido to exist. Either it becomes a radically different martial art, in which case I feel it could become justified to call it Hankido to distinguish it from other Korean martial arts, or just say it's a sub-style of Hapkido, maybe. Say that the art is Hapkido, but a slightly different version of it. That, I believe, is a solution to a problem. If not, then the way it's going, I don't see much reason for Hankido to exist, and that should become extinct just like a Stegosaurus as well.
Olympic Taekwondo.
So, controversial, but I believe Olympic Taekwondo should become extinct. Yes, and coming from a Taekwondo background, I am now immune to people saying that I'm going to be prejudiced towards these other martial arts except Taekwondo. I hate Taekwondo, I love Taekwondo. One thing in particular though, I'm realistic, and if I see a NAF technique, or I see an art going in a NAF direction, I will call it out. Taekwondo, Olympic-wise, has gone in a very, very NAF direction, so it deserves to be called out. Distinguishing between traditional Taekwondo and the Olympic sport-orientated. And even the ITF uses sport. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the Olympics. WT Taekwondo. It has basically become foot fencing. And this all came around by wearing body armor, hugus, which electronically scored. So you put a little bit of pressure onto your hugu, it would then register how much pressure was there to say, yes, you've been struck with a punch or a kick. What happened there was basically people just wanted to score enough to make enough pressure to score. They didn't want to like slam the legs in like in Kyokushin and Muay Thai to do damage. They thought if basically the line of thinking became, I don't even need to hurt or damage my opponent. I just need to touch this body armor enough for it to register that I've scored. And then the whole strategies then changed from having predominantly rear leg techniques, which was considered like more powerful, to front leg, what they call cut kicks. Now, cut kick is basically just a fancy name for lift up your leg and gently push it out. They call it cut kick, I call it a mess. But nobody listens to me in the Kukiwon or WT, but that's another story. But cut kicks have now become the modus operandi of Olympic Taekwondo. If you see Olympic Taekwondo in their fights, it will pretty much just be figures, cut kicks, and they'll clash into each other's legs. Somebody will fall on the floor, and I look at that sometimes and think, surely those little cut kick, tiny pushes are not sufficient enough to push you onto the floor. So then it leads me to believe that maybe that's like some strategy kind of thing that they have. If I fall on the floor, then I can catch 5 seconds worth of air before I have to go up and do my cut kicks again. You don't see the dynamic kicking that Taekwondo built a reputation up to show. You rarely see meaningful, powerful combinations. There have been some Taekwondo sparrers way back in like the early 90s when you had body armor, but it was so thin you might as well have not even worn it. And you see them like using all these combinations. You see them using feints and tricks and stance changes and all this kind of stuff. And Taekwondo, even at that time, even if it still wasn't considered street savvy, it was still beautiful to watch, and you knew those kicks were going to do damage. So where it is now, all this protective gear and just cut kicks all the time to electronic body armor, and people call themselves fighters, it's like, sorry, no sale. Olympic Taekwondo, and this is an important thing to say, if WT Taekwondo was not in the Olympics, nobody would take it seriously. And a lot of people don't take it seriously anyway for this very reason. But the Olympics has kind of like kept it alive. If it wasn't involved in the Olympics, it would have died out and become extinct like a Stegosaurus many years ago. Martial art.
George Black Rhino White Hippo Jeet Kune Do MMA Dojo.
Black Rhino MMA and Jeet Kune Do. So this one isn't so much a style or an art, it's just one particular person's approach to an already established art and style. Needless to say, it's naff, it's rubbish, it shouldn't exist, and that should be extinct as well. Like a Stegosaurus, like a T-Rex. No, I won't. Well, actually, no, I will call it a T-Rex, because the T-Rex has got like these sneaky little claws. So, despite it having a big mouth, you know, it'll be kind of screwed if it wants to masturbate. Martial art.
Sumo wrestling.
We come on to sumo. Now, I have to be honest, I don't have anything personally against sumo wrestling, and if anything, I can understand sumo has a very rich cultural heritage. It is steeped in religion. It is very unique to Japan. However, I find these are its very strengths are what should qualify it to become extinct. The fact that it's only practiced in Japan, it's only understood in Japan, it's only valued in Japan, you can only make a career out of it in Japan. No other country that I'm aware of in the whole wide world has any sort of association or attachment to sumo. Sorry. You don't, from what I understand, get the Bosnian Sumo Association, or you don't get the Ugandan Sumo Federation, or you don't get these things. It seems to be too steeped in Japan, and Japan has a very unique culture. Japan's a very, very unique country in itself that only Japan can understand Japanese culture fully. And I feel that when you see sumo wrestlers like walking down the street in Japan, they are regarded as celebrities. People do aspire to become sumo wrestlers in Japan, from what I understand, and they can make a career out of it. They become like yokozunas and stuff like this. But nowhere else in the world. I've never seen a sumo dojo in any place I've traveled to in the world. I've never heard of one. I've never heard anybody in any place I've been to say, I want to make a career out of becoming a sumo wrestler. When you watch sumo wrestling competitions as well, it's so steeped in ritual that actually some of the rituals are longer than the bouts. And the bouts are literally just push somebody out of a ring, there you go. And I remember when I was a kid at school, we used to like push people out of like drawn circles that we had on the ground and the playground, like basketball, makeshift basketball kind of court. We used to push people out of it and all this kind of stuff. Does that mean that we'd become sumo wrestlers inadvertently or unknowingly? That's a thought worth considering, I suppose, on my therapist's couch. But I just don't see sumo being a serious thing. No disrespect intended. That's just my personal opinion. Anyway, next martial art. And so we reach a finale. And my final martial art I believe should be extinct is drum roll. Probably doesn't come as a surprise, but it's taekwondo. Yes. Now, regular viewers of my channel would seem to think I have a real thing against taekwondo. Yes, I'm going to agree with that, because I do have a thing against taekwondo, but I've justified why I have a thing against taekwondo in previous videos I've done. Taekwondo claims to be on its website the most effective martial art in the world. Not only that, they claim to be proven the most effective martial art in the world. Yet, despite that, they've never provided any evidence to back up that claim. And if you're going to make a claim like that, you need to have evidence to back it up. Otherwise, it just becomes a statement. For instance, I'm the President of the United States. I've got no evidence to prove it, so it's not a substantiated claim. It's just me making a statement. It doesn't mean it's so. I'm not the President of the United States. There's evidence to disprove that. So we need evidence to show that taekwondo is not the most effective martial art in the world. Now, taekwondo, basically the techniques are rubbish. They are impractical. And again, people could look at this and say, Sam, you're being subjective. Yeah, this is from my personal experience of when I've gone off to Choi lessons and studied and trained in taekwondo. I'm saying this from my own personal subjective experience. However, there is a strain of psychology which says your own subjective experiences make your own truth, or make the truth. But I feel that most people would agree that taekwondo, if you watch taekwondo, it's bent legs all the time, and it's bent front leg front kicks, it's bent front leg side kicks, it's bent punches, which are, you bend your arms anyway. I know we're not going to get into too many technical details, but the taekwondo ones are like so bent, you're not going to do anything. You're just going to crumple up your arm if you make contact with that. The numerous, going away from the techniques for a start, the uniforms, the dobok, you get all these hundreds and hundreds of different coloured dobok. And again, I feel that's a sales ploy. It's like when you get to a next belt, you have to buy a new dobok. Then you go grading again, you get another belt, you have to buy another dobok. Money-making scam. I understand that you have to pay loads of money sometimes in order to grade. There's this deification of the grandmaster, the guy who made taekwondo. He's like revered basically throughout the whole system, and woe on you if you dare say anything negative about him or you dare critique any of his methods. This kind of like idol fantasy worship, and when I went to Choi, they spent a lot of time slating taekwondo. I've seen numerous Choi videos on YouTube where they'll slate numerous martial arts, especially taekwondo. They seem to have a real bugbear against taekwondo, but that's not surprising when you consider the founder of Choi Kwang-do trained in taekwondo. Apparently, he messed up his joints and he blames taekwondo, and yet I've never heard of any other taekwondo practitioner busting up their joints through taekwondo practice. So the evidence would then be suggestive that actually this individual was just maybe didn't stretch off and bust up his legs, and instead of taking responsibility, he blamed something else. He blamed the system, but the system works for thousands of other people. It's just you, but it must be the system's fault. And that is the Choi Kwang-do mentality. They say as well that no, we don't teach the combat aspect, which then contradicts what they're saying about proven to be the most effective martial art. They'll then say, yeah, but we teach more like yoga-based approaches and about breathing and aerobics and stretching and holistic approaches. And you think, well, that's all very well, but you don't need to go to a martial art or something which claims to be a martial art to do that. Go to a yoga class. Go do some mindfulness. Go to creative therapies. Just do some deep breathing on the beach. Just do some stretches. You don't even need to go off to a class. You know, I don't know, you're cooking something at dinner time and you just like stretch across against a counter and this kind of stuff, which is something which I personally do myself. I don't need to go to a class for that. So taekwondo doesn't even have any place in those holistic aspects it claims to espouse and claims to promote and be really cool at. So it fails as martial art, it fails as some creative therapeutic approach. Does taekwondo have any place in the world? No. Extinct with the dodo. But I like dodos. Oh, from the pictures I've seen of dodos, they look kind of cool actually. All those martial arts should be buried with the dinosaurs. Now, I'd like to say that I understand that there could be some people who might take umbrage to some of the martial arts I've listed and will come back with some comments of their own. That's absolutely fine. I'm not taking a personal dig at you as practitioners, and that's something that some practitioners need to like distance themselves personally from their martial arts. Just because somebody is critiquing a martial art you do, it does not mean that they're attacking you as a person. It just means they're attacking that system. One should learn to differentiate between the system and themselves. I started out in taekwondo. I've just had a video where I've just critiqued taekwondo quite savagely. Just learn to let go. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Do you agree with the list I've provided? Do you not agree? And if not, why not? Are there some martial arts which you feel as though I've missed out? Maybe martial arts you've trained in which you think are a little bit antique and need to be extinct? In which case, I would love to hear from you. I really, really would. Let's get a debate going about this because I am actually kind of genuinely interested. Anyway, guys, I'm Sam from Gemini. Stay safe, train hard, and keep listening to White Zombie because they're the best band around. And I'll see you all in the next video. We've got one more of these videos to do, and that's about mental health and martial arts. Booyah!